So the lack of reliable water supply in KwaZulu-Natal has been intensified as flood relief efforts continue. Residents in various parts of the province have been standing in snaking queues for hours simply to try to get water for their daily needs. The question now is whether the province is actually on the brink of a water supply crisis. To help us unpack this, let's bring in the University of Johannesburg's water expert, Professor Patrick Bond, who joins us via our video link this morning. And Prof, it's great to see you. Thanks so much indeed for making time. It's a bit of a paradoxical situation what's unfolding in KZN, isn't it? Too much water in the form of the rains we've seen is ironically leading to a potential water supply crisis. Help us, I guess, connect the dots about how these two things are related.
It's nice to be with you, Ida, and the listeners. I think the main thing to consider, it's not only with water, the 17 billion rand overall cost announced this morning. That is let's say, a reflection of infrastructure that's just fallen apart that needs to be reconstructed, whether it's your basic housing infrastructure, the dwellings, many built on excessively steep hills or in the floodplains, or these water pipes. Now, the dilemma is that Durban actually was always celebrated. In 2014, it won the Stockholm Water Institute Award, this sort of Nobel Prize for water. But many of the, let's say, plaudits of, the awards, the celebration of what Durban had done in the field of water, I feel weren't necessarily deserved. The same for climate adaptation, where they were often awarded some of the main prizes in the world. And that's because they were doing it on the cheap, and they basically had put in systems such as ventilated improved pit latrines and urine diversion toilets for the massive people in the shack settlements. Over a third of the city is in these shack settlements. And these really haven't worked, especially when they come under this extreme stress, nor have the water mains held up. And that's because of, I think, systematic underinvestment in maintenance. At one point in 2009, a decision was made to take water money and put a brand new stadium, the Moses Mabhida Stadium, into place right next to an existing world-class stadium. And these are the sorts of decisions to skimp for poor people's water and sanitation and to redirect the bulk infrastructure that I think now the problems are coming home to roost.
Right. And Umgeni Water being one of the largest bulk water suppliers, I think, in the country, you'd imagine that there's certain lessons that they've learned along the way about how to configure, for instance, their infrastructure to be able to respond to crises like this. The sense I'm getting from you is that not much has really been done to circumvent the worst-case scenario, as it were, in the event of a natural disaster.
Yes, now this is again a climate change adaptation challenge. Umgeni Water, which is handling the bulk systems for KZN, can be blamed partly because of their mismanagement, corruption. It's been notorious, but it's also at the municipal level. And again, even where Durban has won awards for its adaptation, it really didn't do very much, particularly where ordinary people, poor people, were concerned, to prevent the kind of chaos of the mudslides, the rising waters from the various tributaries and rivers that killed so many of those 500 or so in the province, more than 400 in Durban alone. And I think now this is where we could do a Build Back Better, the one that was promised from the COVID-19 recovery, with the rapid training of people to be able to put together much better water systems and more state resources, because frankly the water budget has been starved or to some extent from national level stolen. And I think it's really a chance for the whole country, because the problems in Durban, especially wastewater systems, these are actually problems the whole country is facing. And this would be a wonderful opportunity, wouldn't it, to say a public works approach. And, to Patricia DeLille, the minister's credit, she is looking at Durban, trying to figure out where to get more land into the hands of the city to make housing available in appropriate places, not, as I say, on the hills and the floodplains. This is the kind of opportunity, if the state were a little bit more imaginative and aggressive to address the most essential need we all have, water and sanitation, to really pull out a national program and to use Durban as a site to really rapidly rebuild. The costs are now coming in at over 1 billion. Now, that's very little compared to a nearly 2 trillion rand national budget. But this is one of the areas where Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has imposed austerity budget cuts since October last year. It's a chance to relook at that and say, let's climate-proof our water systems all over the country.
And, for a water-scarce country like South Africa, people are hoping that there'll be some kind of silver lining when there's flooding taking place. And by that I mean they're hoping that the water that arrives in the form of rain will be, I guess, utilized in a way that at least helps circumvent the one crisis, which is the country not having enough water for its population. But if infrastructure is obviously not placed in the right ways, or if it's not, up to standard, as it were, then there's a lost opportunity even in those moments, in moments where you could at least solve the water crisis because of the bountiful rain that you've received.
Yes, I don't think anyone would dispute that higher standards of services and better maintenance are going to be crucial. And it is important to say, well, in the eastern side of the country, and Gauteng itself has also had this experience this summer, there will be more rain than normal. And these extreme weather events, cyclone-type events, this wasn't cyclone related, but in the sense that we are going to be facing much greater strains on stormwater drainage. That's a very important place to start our long-term reconstruction and climate proofing for the other parts of the country that have suffered droughts that really wrecked some of our agricultural areas and threatened major cities like Cape Town and Quebec with day zero status. That's another opportunity to do a different kind of water infrastructure, to look at the extent to which storage is going to be possible and underground systems, boreholes, and so forth. I think for especially black farmers, the lack of irrigation is another one of those areas where climate adaptation and resilience strategy is going to be important. And, in all of these respects, we have a fair bit of rhetoric, and President Ramaphosa recognizes that the climate crisis will make what we've just seen in Durban a couple of weeks ago much more common. We have to prepare for that. And that means really a revaluing of our water and sanitation in what is, as you say, a water-scarce country, but one where we might have yet more. I mean, in 2019, we had 168 millimeters in 24 hours. In 2017, we had 108 millimeters, again in the same place in Durban. And then 2 weeks ago, in 24 hours, 351 millimeters in some of the record sites. It's absolutely clear that if South Africa doesn't get more serious about climate adaptation and also address our emissions, our very high levels of emissions per person per unit of output, third highest in the world, then we're just going to be muddling through, and many more hundreds, if not thousands of lives will be at threat as these extreme weather events continue and even get worse.
Part of, I guess, the benefit that comes with starting from scratch is that you get to rebuild with a different intent in mind. KZN perhaps has that unique opportunity as they begin their rebuilding processes. Where do you reckon they should start in a context where already we're seeing people getting water wherever they can, and who can blame them because it's not coming out of their taps?
That's right. It's absolutely desperate in the townships and even in some of the middle class and the beachside areas, the South Durban, parts of North Durban, still not fully recovered. Now they're getting temporary provisions. There are new pipes that are going, especially over some of the rivers, the Mfloti, the Umgeni, and Mbilo. These are rivers where the water pipes were basically too low to the water line and were just washed out. So there are some temporary fixes. But I think a good mix between the bulk systems, and especially to let people know that for retail systems, for their household systems, there will be a state plan, if we can push the state to do so, to rebuild houses with decent water and sanitation, not the existing VIP long drops or the urine diversion. These are very unpopular and they haven't worked. But really to get a better housing program up and running immediately. And that means going back to even basic ideas like the Reconstruction and Development Program of 1994 and figuring out why we kind of diverted from that just to save a few cents. We were really being penny wise and pound foolish when it came then to a disaster of this magnitude.